The trail is a metaphor for change. Although hiking, and specifically endurance hiking, is now a big part of my day-to-day, it's not just about exercise. It's about transformation. Each step is a movement towards clarity, purpose, and identity. But movement is one thing, sharing insights gained is another. As a U.S. Marine veteran, I created this space to help other veterans gain clarity, purpose, and identity. Let's walk this path together. This is Trail to Transformation.
Most people aren't broken, they're just dysregulated. Chronic stress, pain, anxiety, and burnout aren't mindset failures. They're nervous systems stuck in survival. I'm Leland Holgate, combat veteran and neuroscientist, and I created the Welcome Home method to help people rewire their nervous systems with breath. And to go deeper, visit thewillfulwarrior.com.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith Lee. Now I'm here with Jason, and Jason's going to introduce himself in just a bit. We're going to learn a bit more about his story today. But I just wanted to say, every time I listen to my introduction, I'm so inspired by my own story, and I love it. I need to update those pictures at some point with pictures of the Appalachian Trail, but we'll get there. Jason, welcome to the conversation. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on today.
So who are you? Give us some backdrop into who you are, please.
Yeah, thank you. We always start the story from the beginning. And my beginning was I was born a healer. I was from the earliest of age. I always knew that I saw things, felt things, knew things, that my journey was going to be about supporting others on their journey. And that's a whole another conversation because I'm a Gen Xer. I was born in the times where, I was very emotional. I was an empath. I'm an empath, and where boys don't cry, things of that nature. And so that was my early challenges of figuring out my journey, what it was going to look like. But then I was a poet. I'm a writer. But I started martial arts at age of 6. I've done several different types of martial arts throughout my life. The question that we get, I'm also a U.S. Marine veteran, and the question that obviously as veterans we get is, well, why did you join? And, we all come up with our answers. We come up with something. And, just recently, I'm 54 years old, and just recently I really I figured out kind of, I think what it was that I found a way to be of service in a way that was acceptable within that dynamic. And it was a way for me to serve. I'm not a flag waving patriot. I'm a patriot. I love my country, but it wasn't like, yeah, America, that's what I'm going to do. That wasn't my calling. My calling was being of service in that way. And so at 17, I graduated high school, went in the Marine Corps, did 5 years, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I got out, didn't really see who I am as a healer and of being of service as a career, and just kind of pushed it away. But at one point I said, if I'm going to help people, I need to have a toolbox. I can't just sit with people. I was always the friend that people could come and sit with and talk with. I always knew when to talk, when to listen, etc. All those good things, communication. But I said, I need a toolbox. I need a way to do this if I'm going to do this. And so I looked around and kind of, long story short, I found neurolinguistic programming, NLP, which is basically using the language of the mind to get the results that you want. We talked earlier about not getting too technical today, so I love the science. What I do is an art and a science, and I love both sides of it, and I could geek out, talking about earlier, there was the thing about the neuroscientist, about welcoming home, right up my alley. I got excited to see that, and, conversations for a later day. Anyway, so I got my training, I got of that. I didn't see clients. I was working in retail leadership. That was a way for me to help people kind of along their journey, because a lot of people were younger, starting their path. Jumping ahead now, I've had my company full-time for 5 years, part-time for about 12 years, been seeing clients. Neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, timeline therapy, polyvagal theory, mindfulness and meditation. I separated from the Marine Corps at a time when it was There was no separation other than go away. It was, there's a book in the library, base library called "What Color Is Your Parachute?" You might want to read that. That was kind of what we did at that time. There was none of these. There's a lot of great programs. They can get better. They have gotten better, and so I just got out, and that was it. And I was done with my service, and then I jumped in the civilian world, and I just had to kind of figure out, okay, well, what do you do? Well, you get a job, and I get in a relationship. You do that. So I brought my girlfriend with me, which is now my wife from North Carolina. She drove, came back, and you figure those things out. You do what you kind of do. So about, I don't know, what is this, 2026, 15 or so years ago, I said, I want to give back to my brothers and sisters in arms. I want to give back. I mean, our longest war basically in history was going on, and you participated in that in different ways, obviously. And I saw the need for it. I saw the need for support and for help, and just we know the statistics, we know the numbers, and there's tragedy behind that. So I said, I want to help. I want to be of support. I've got this training. I've got this. This is who I am. I can support them. So I found a group out here. At the time, they were called Honoring the Path of the Warrior. I'm in California, by the way, close to the Bay Area, and they since changed their name to the Veterans Path. And it was two people from the San Francisco Zen Center that started this group of helping veterans using mindfulness and nature to reconnect, to help them process trauma, PTSD, CPSD, etc. And it was an amazing organization. About 3 years ago, they ended up closing down from financing, but it was a great organization, a great experience. Going out to Green Gulch, Muir Beach, these beautiful areas. That's where I learned my walking meditation, which I now teach for people. The interesting thing was that during the process of going to my first meeting, so to speak, I was like, wow, I need this too. I'm just not, it turns out I'm not here for everyone else. I am, but I'm here for me too. You know, the one thing that I tell people about, and we could definitely, I would love to hear what you think about this. Just being in the military is hard. Forget combat, forget all this deployments and overseas and all that stuff. Just shaving your head and sending you to boot camp. That's traumatic. That's like, wait, whole new world. You have to learn all these new ways of speaking and literally walking and talking and engaging with other humans. And so just that alone, and then you start talking about deployments and going overseas, being away from family, and then you talk about going downrange, so to speak, and what that brings up. So there's so much to it. So there's just so much opportunity to help our brothers and sisters, because then you get out, once again, like I said, you get out and you're like, now what? Is that kind of your experience? How did you figure that when you transitioned out?
Well, I think, like you, my story is back in the late 80s, early 90s. You're handed your DD 214, right?
Yeah,
You've got your car keys in hand,
yeah,
and that's pretty much it. You get to drive off of base one last time and kind of go enter into civilian world. And for me, um, that was a transition that there was no preparation for. You had, like you talked about, going through boot camp and going into the fleet, your whole life changes, whether it's traumatic or not, your life changes. And then going back into the civilian world, your life changes again. Um, my first job was selling ice cream out of an ice cream truck. There was no preparation.
yeah,
But you had talked about even going into boot camp could be traumatic, let alone serving in the fleet or serving in the military, regardless. And then there's the extension of being in a combat situation. Now, as a Marine veteran, I have PTSD. I'm psychotic most days, and I've had 5 suicide attempts and a heart attack. So I always say it's very hard for me to die. At least I'm not doing it right.
right.
In your capacity as somebody who is focused on helping people get past trauma, such as myself, where does a conversation start?
The first thing that I want to mention about that is that In order to reach out and get help, the person that's helping you does not have to be a veteran, doesn't have to be from the same service, but it helps. You and I speak the same language. We were in different parts of the Marine Corps for sure, different experiences in the Marine Corps for sure, but we were both in the Marine Corps. So we can shorthand these conversations. Like you said, you were joking about I'm hard to kill or it's hard for me to die. That could be very dark to some people, but I'm like, that's funny. You know, we have that sense of humor, so we can engage in different ways. And so I mention that because that's the conversation can start there, where I don't know what you went through. I didn't go what you went through specifically, but I have an idea. We come from the same culture and we have the same similar values. And that's one of the big switches going from a civilian to military and then from military to civilian is your values, and values are what's important to you. Your values drastically shift. So starting with people, and this is all clients for me, I start where they are at. So let's start the conversation. Where are you at? What's going on in your life? What's showing up that you like? What's showing up that you don't like? What's happening? And here's the bottom thing, and not to get too technical, but all life is story. Whether you're talking about shamanism, indigenous cultures, or Jungian psychology, all life is story. And it starts with what story you're telling yourself. And the problem with a lot of trauma, which leads to PTSD or CPTSD, is that your story keeps getting stronger and it keeps driving you in certain ways. And there's reasons for that. One of the possibilities is that, we talk about in the veteran community, we talk about not all wounds are visible. We're taught to be strong, we're taught to be big, we're taught to whatever, and now you have these mental issues that are pulling you down. But a lot of folks don't have the physical disability, so to speak. So it's like you almost have to say, well, no, really, this is really bad. Like you try to prove yourself. And so you tell that story, and when you retell that story, it gets bigger and stronger. Not saying you're lying about it, but just saying you give it more power. No, I was in this situation, and I was in that situation. And we as military folks have a bad habit of comparing ourselves. Oh, I don't know if we can cuss on the show, so I'm not going to, but you didn't see nothing, man. I didn't see nothing, man. That other guy, he saw a lot more than I did, or she saw more than I did. I only had 3 bombs go off. They had 15, or we do that comparison thing, and it's like we diminish what our experience was. And so I want to start with truth and honesty. Here's where we're at. Let's talk about what's your story and how do you see what's going on.
Marines and probably military veterans, service members in general, do tell themselves that narrative. And for many years, my narrative was the same. Misfits, don't belong, and other words I could easily describe myself.
Right.
It wasn't until the fifth suicide attempt, so back in 2021, that I knew that if I didn't make changes
Right.
for me personally, that this situation, because it seems to be a cyclical event, it's kind of the same variables that once they kind of are to a degree, my life implodes.
Right.
The thing I needed to do for me was make connections, make friends, make them in a new way, a better way, a healthier way, to kind of expand my horizons or my bubble. I'm going to throw the question back to you. Where is connection as part of the healing journey? Now, you've talked about you have different pathways to healing.
Right.
Where is community connection in terms of healing?
I love that question. Thank you, because it's like my soapbox moment. So, without going on the soapbox, what I tell people is that there's three main connections. Main connections. There's connection to self, there's connection to others, and there's connection to something bigger than us. And whether you call that God, spirit, source, nature, whatever you call that, there's that connection. Those are the three connections we see in life. and they're all important. Usually, when people start off, when they're having a mental health issue leading to mental illness, they're looking at connection to others first. They don't understand me. They don't see me. They don't get it. I can't talk to them. I can't communicate with them. We speak a different language. The reality is that you have to start with yourself and you have to connect to yourself. And we're not gonna get into details today, but talking about one of the biggest challenges, this is a huge subject, is moral injury. Especially with combat veterans, moral injury comes up, and then that's the issue where it's hard to love yourself because you're judging yourself for the things you saw and did and didn't do or didn't see, whatever. But connection is very important. So, talking about that something bigger connection, I love that, like, we're aligned because Veterans Path, I work with a group called Beekeeping for Veterans. I work with a couple of veterans group, and it's all about reconnecting to nature. And that's source. That is that, whatever you call it, that's that connection. So starting with just, they say that just watching videos of nature for 10 minutes brings all of your stress indicators down. Going out in nature for just, I think it's as little as 3 minutes, does the same thing. So we're wired to be part of that. So that connection to nature is super important. Then the connection to yourself. Someone was earlier talking about coming home. If you look at the symbol for my company, it shows up in a lot of different cultures, but I took it from, and it's a Native American indigenous symbol for welcoming warriors home. Go figure. But then from that point, when you're your best self, then you can connect with others, and community is so important for that. And sometimes it goes in different order. Reaching into community, like when I worked with Veterans Path, just getting around a bunch of veterans and stuff and having those conversations, man, it just brought the temperature down. Like you could see us all just finally take a breath. Like we felt like we could actually do something. Like we go, oh my goodness, I remember this. This is home for me, and it gives you that chance. And then through connecting with that community, I have a saying: in community we heal, and in community we grow. And I think that sums it up.
Throughout this conversation so far, you've been talking about connecting with nature, which is, for me, where I'm at. So the name of the foundation is Trail to Transformation. The name of the TV show is Trail to Transformation. There's a reason for that. Is because not only after my fifth suicide attempt, a year later I had a heart attack. And although I've always been, I want to say, athletic, I've always been an exerciser, even post my Marine service. Being outside is important to me, but it became even more important
Right.
after the heart attack because because what I was doing in terms of exercise, which was mostly strength training, and I would eat anything, literally, just about, except for asparagus or something like that. Something weird. I would eat literally anything. And so even though things looked good on the outside, which
Right.
was pumping up my ego, I wasn't taking care of me,
Yeah.
and I was killing literally my heart and my kidneys. And so I had to find out a new way of being me that felt natural.
Right.
And I put my backpack back on. I got a ruck, right?
Nice.
And I now have a service dog. I've got Ashley. And so being outside every day, walking, and quite literally 12, 13, 14 miles, and sometimes up to 20,
Wow.
with the purpose, yeah, with the purpose of hiking. We're training for the Appalachian Trail. So we attempted it this year, 2026. I'm not going to use the F word, and that's not the other word. It's the failure word.
Right.
It was a learning lesson, lessons learned, right? So we're going to go back on next year, 2027. With the time that we've got left, talk to us really. And you mentioned about walking meditation. I want to know more about that. Maybe we don't have time for that today, but talk to us in more depth about the value of nature and being outside.
It's so important. This is, the saying is that we're, as humans, we're very good at planning our lives, but we're not so good at living our lives. And the example that I teacher, I never worked directly with him, but his work, Thich Thich Nhat, a Vietnamese Zen monk, he talks about, if I'm out in nature and I see a beautiful flower 15 feet away, I walk over to that flower. When I get to that flower, I'm going to smell it. It's beautiful. I'm going to enjoy it. But every step I took going to that flower is life. Why would I give up those moments of life to get to something that I think is better in life? And so walking meditation is just that. It's meditating while you walk. It's being present for every step because every step and every moment is the only life that you and I have. And so it grounds you. And there's more to it, of course, around the technical aspects and the metaphor of it. But basically, what you're doing is you start with your breath, you're breathing, and then what you do is you count how many steps you take with your inhale, how many steps you take with your exhale, and then you use that count kind of as your mantra. And you focus on that, and that quiets what we call the monkey brain, right? Because if out in nature, there's always birds chirping, there's the monkeys in the trees, depending where you're at, and we get distracted by that. But what walking meditation does is it brings you back to yourself and to that very moment. And that's very important. And I talked about the three connections. Well, you go on a walking meditation with a group. So first of all, you're connecting to yourself because your breath, your steps, you're connecting with your community, and then you're connecting to nature. How amazing is that? I do a walk down here. It's called Puda Creek. It's right by my house. It's this amazing creek. It's a trail. And you get that chance to connect to all three connections. And so being out in nature with other people, even if you do it by yourself, it's still great. But then coming home to yourself at the same time, it brings all those together. So walking meditation is just really about knowing that you can focus and be mindful of every moment, regardless of what you're doing. Meditation is not just sitting in the lotus position with the mudras and the spine in a certain way and your chin just trying to. I've done that. I've done zazen. You know, whew, it could be challenging, but this gives you opportunity to say, just being when you're out doing your walks, you're meditating. You're present in nature. You're present with yourself. You're present with your dog. You know, and you're doing a process that brings you that mindfulness. And so that's what walking meditation does.
And I appreciate all of that. And there was a time, and I still do it. I actually count to 100. Like every left foot from the Marine Corps. That's a big
Right.
thing.
Yes. Yeah.
I count to 100 steps.
Right.
And then I count to 100 steps again. And then I count to, so I have 1,000 upon thousands upon thousands of steps that I've literally counted. I have added some other forms of mindfulness practice when I do walk, but there's actually, and I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. I did some reading online, of course, about how the body changes physiologically. So decreased cortisol levels,
Right.
increased all those good hormones that I can't probably pronounce today, even if I tried. The body changes. The body literally changes from the inside out. In about a minute or so, can you speak to that, or can you reference that in any way? The body changing?
Yeah, the biggest challenge we have with all things is stress. And stress is, that's your nervous system telling you you're in danger. And that's one of the biggest challenges of trauma, which then can lead to, it doesn't have to, but can lead to like PTSD, is that your nervous system gets out of whack. And what happens is it thinks you're under attack when you're not, and it sends those stress hormones. Here's one of, we don't have a lot of time, but stress hormones are not bad. Stress hormones are what keep you running away from the bear. Stress hormones are what keep you able to get up off that couch in the morning, or get off that couch and get out of bed in the morning. They have a purpose. It's with anything in life, it's the overuse of. And so, yeah, you're talking about like oxytocin, getting those good reward hormones, things going in your body. What happens is when you bring your stress down and your nervous system is regulated, someone talked about that earlier, is regulated, then your nervous system is acting in the way that it should. So you're not startled. Your startle effect isn't showing up, and that's what it is. Yeah, there's a lot of science behind it. We're obviously not going to get into that, but the reality is that in polyvagal theory, we say what came from downstream or upstream that's causing this to happen. So regardless of what chemical is being released at what time, the thing you have to realize is, why is it getting released now when you don't need it? And that's what I do. I help people go back, and what's about it's the story. What's the story upstream that's flowing downstream that where you're reacting to this situation today in this moment in a way that's not best for you and causing
Then,
the most distress?
then I'm going to cut you out there because we're about out of time. I know I want you back. If you're so willing,
Yep.
I'd have you back. Come on.
Yep.
And for everybody else, I'll see you on the trail. Take care.
Thank you for watching Tread of Transformation TV. To support these conversations or to support the foundation, I would ask that you go to givebutter.com/T3missionorg. That's the letter T, the number 3, MISSIONORG. Or go directly to our website at t3mission.org and click the donate button. Or just scan the QR code as you see it on the screen. And as always, I will see you on the trail.